"Stop walking," she whispered. I turned around and saw her standing 5 paces behind me, one hand over her chest, the other hanging limp like it forgot how to be useful. Her scarf, the burgundy one I found under the bed once and didn't ask about, was twisted halfway off her shoulder. She looked like she'd seen an accident, or caused one. I followed her gaze. There was no one. Just a street lamp flickering above a sandwich board for a cafe that, as far as I knew, had been shut down 2 years ago. Yet here we were, outside it, lights on, tables full, jazz playing, and inside, seated calmly like he belonged in our day, was a man I didn't recognize, but she clearly did. She didn't blink. Not once. I'd never seen her that still. "What is this?" I asked, not because I needed an answer, but because the silence felt like it might start screaming. She didn't respond. Her eyes were glass. My mouth went dry. 9 years of marriage, and I've never seen her afraid of anything. She laughs at thunderstorms. She doesn't flinch during horror movies. She once chased a raccoon off our porch with a flashlight and a sarcastic monologue. But now she looked like prey. I stepped closer. She didn't even move. Just stood there, stone. "You know him?" I asked. Still nothing. Not even a twitch. Then, just when I thought she might collapse into herself, she turned to me and said something I will never forget. "Don't go in there." And walked away. Just like that. No explanation. No answer. Not even a second glance. She just turned around, headed back down the sidewalk like we hadn't just time-traveled into some weird pocket of our past. I stood there, watching her shrink into the city, completely unsure if I should follow her or go inside. I went inside. I don't know why. Maybe it was spite. Maybe curiosity. Maybe some part of me already knew that whatever was waiting in that cafe was going to dig a hole through the version of my life I thought was real. There was no jazz playing anymore. The tables were empty. The man was gone. And on the table by the window, the one where he had been sitting moments ago, was a single paper napkin. It had her handwriting on it. It simply said, "You weren't supposed to see him." I didn't touch the napkin. I just stared at it. Her handwriting, the slightly slanted, looping kind she uses when she's in a hurry, looked rushed but unmistakable. There were even tiny coffee stains in the corner, like she'd written it in panic and tried to wipe her hands clean before someone noticed. But how? When? I had been gone for seconds. We'd just arrived. We were supposed to be meeting friends 2 blocks away. This cafe shouldn't even be open. None of it made sense, and the worst part was, deep down, I had a feeling she knew I would come in anyway. That the napkin was meant to be found. The lights inside were humming softly. Not flickering. Not old. Not abandoned. Fresh pastries behind the glass counter. A register screen blinking ready. But no people. Not even staff. Just the faint smell of nutmeg and something sweeter underneath, like burnt syrup or melted plastic. I glanced outside. She was gone. The sidewalk where she stood was empty. I pulled out my phone. No service. Typical. I took a photo of the napkin just in case. The screen glitched for a split second, then the photo disappeared before I could check the gallery. Not deleted. Just not there. I should have left. A smarter version of me would have. But I noticed something behind the counter. A framed photo. At first, it looked like any black and white cafe decor piece, but when I got closer, my stomach turned to ash. It was her. Clara. Younger, maybe 23 or 24. Sitting at a table outside the very same cafe. She was smiling, and not in the way she does for family Christmas photos or work Zoom calls. This was different. Radiant. Honest. I'd never seen that smile before. And beside her, in the photo, was the same man from earlier. The one she froze at the sight of, leaning into her shoulder like he belonged there. Like he always had. I don't know how long I stood there. It felt like a small eternity wrapped in a minute. My ears started to ring. Not loudly, but enough to drown out my thoughts. Then I heard a cup clink behind me. I turned. There was a mug sitting on a table near the door. Steam still curling off the top. Cinnamon. Oat milk. Her usual. I was alone. Or so I thought. There was a second cup beside it. Darker roast, no foam. The kind I drank before she asked me to start cutting back on caffeine. I walked over slowly, heart pounding in my throat, and on the saucer under my cup was another napkin. Same handwriting. Fewer words. "He doesn't know about you." I didn't know if that meant me or him. I backed out of the cafe like it might swallow me whole. I stepped into the street, and the cold air hit my chest like a punch. I tried calling her. Nothing. I checked the location share we'd always had on for safety. Disabled. She was gone. And that cafe? When I turned back, it wasn't there. Just a boarded-up storefront with a for lease sign. Like it had always been. Like I imagined the whole thing. But I had the first napkin in my jacket. The one that shouldn't have existed. And as I stood there, gripping it, a new thought entered my mind. The kind of thought that breaks marriages and makes you question your entire sense of reality. What if I was the one who interrupted their life, not the other way around? I didn't tell her what I saw. When I finally found her, she was in the apartment, curled up in bed, headphones on, watching something on her laptop with the volume low. She looked up at me like nothing had happened, like we hadn't walked past a place that didn't exist, like she hadn't seen a ghost, and left me standing there with reality caving in around me. She smiled. It was faint, polite, maybe even guilty. "Everything okay?" she asked. I lied. Of course I lied. I mumbled something about needing air and getting turned around. She nodded too quickly. She wanted me to lie. That's the thing you start to notice when you live with someone long enough. Not the lies themselves, but the welcoming of them. She gave me an exit, and I took it. Because the alternative, the truth, was starting to look like something neither of us could survive. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed next to her and listened to the sound of her breathing. Even that didn't feel familiar anymore. I used to count it like a rhythm that anchored me. But now it just felt off. Like I was listening to someone pretending to sleep. Around 3:40 a.m., I slipped out of bed and went to the hallway closet where we kept the storage boxes. Old college papers, birthday cards, photos we never framed. I started digging. Quietly. Carefully. My fingers were shaking, my breath tight. I was looking for something, anything, that might prove the man in the photo was just a coincidence. That the napkins were some kind of prank. That I'd been overthinking it. I wanted to be wrong. Instead, I found a journal. It was shoved into the back of an old laptop sleeve she hadn't used in years. A plain, black notebook with no label, no name. I hesitated. My hands felt cold. I stared at the cover for almost 5 minutes, debating whether this was a line I could uncross. I opened it. The entries weren't dated. No Dear Diary nonsense. Just sentences. Fragments. Little snapshots of her thoughts, but not the kind she ever shared with me. He told me it was never going to feel right to walk away. I saw him again today. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. I can't keep holding 2 lives in my chest. He asked if I was happy. I said yes. I lied. The more I read, the more my stomach twisted into something unrecognizable. This wasn't from before we met. I recognized references. Her first freelance gig, our second apartment, the cat we rescued. This wasn't before me. This was during me. But the worst part was the name. She never wrote it. Not once. Just he. Like if she kept it vague enough, it wouldn't be real. Like if she didn't put it on paper, it wouldn't stain. But I remembered the photo in the cafe. His face. The way he looked at her like she was something he'd lost, not something he'd ever given up. I put the journal back where I found it. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I couldn't. Because something inside me whispered that this wasn't about a one-time mistake or some forgotten past resurfacing. This was ongoing. It was still alive. And worse, I think it had been protected. Carefully. Lovingly. Built like a second house behind mine. The next morning, she made French toast and hummed while she cooked. She kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted to drive upstate this weekend. "Clear our heads," she said. "Unplug." And I said yes. Because I wasn't ready to show her what I knew. Not until I found out exactly who I'd been living with. The drive upstate was her idea. She sold it like a detox. No screens. No distractions. Just us, she said while throwing snacks into a tote bag like this was something spontaneous and wholesome. It was anything but. I knew it. She knew I knew it. But neither of us said a word. We drove in silence for most of the ride. I didn't bring up the cafe. She didn't bring up the way she bolted afterward. Every now and then, she'd glance out the window and sigh like she was trying to match some internal sadness with a physical horizon. It wasn't dramatic. It was practiced. Like a performance she'd given before, maybe to someone else. The cabin she booked was in a wooded area, the kind you see on those cozy escape vlogs, where people chop firewood and make soup on cast iron pans. It was too perfect. A little too curated. She'd clearly been here before. Maybe not physically, but in her mind, and not with me. I know that sounds paranoid, but there are fingerprints in silence if you know how to feel for them. She moved around the place like it was familiar. Opened the drawers without hesitation. Turned the kettle on without asking where it was. When I asked how she found it, she shrugged and said, Pinterest. That night, we played the game we'd perfected, pretending. She laughed at a podcast I didn't find funny. I told her the fire I built was fine even though it kept going out. We drank wine. She curled into me. She touched me the same way she had 1,000 times before. But something was off. Something was dead in her touch. Not cold, but detached. Like muscle memory without meaning. At some point after midnight, when I pretended to fall asleep, I heard her unlock her phone in the dark. 3 taps. Pause. Swipe. She was scrolling. Then she quietly slid out of bed, took her hoodie, and slipped outside. I waited exactly 90 seconds before getting up. I didn't want to follow. I didn't want to be that person. But I did. I watched from the window, just enough to see her pacing on the back deck. She had her phone to her ear. Not texting. Calling. Her voice was low, barely audible, but I caught one sentence before she disappeared around the corner of the cabin. He doesn't know, but I think he suspects now. I froze. She was talking about me. Of course she was. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. Made eggs. Played a playlist we both liked. She even danced a little while stirring the coffee, spinning in socks on the wooden floor like we were in a toothpaste commercial. I watched her like she was a stranger wearing my wife's face. I watched the way she looked at me, like she was trying to measure how close I was to falling apart. Like she was calculating her next move depending on how fragile I looked. That's when I started to realize something I didn't want to admit. This wasn't about guilt. She wasn't trying to protect me. She was trying to manage me. Manage my reaction. Keep the version of me she needed intact long enough to do what? Run? Confess? Disappear? Later that day, I excused myself to the gas station down the road. Told her we were out of firewood and snacks. She smiled, kissed my cheek, said, hurry back. I drove half a mile, pulled into the parking lot of a diner with free Wi-Fi, and started digging. Reverse searched the cafe address, the one that vanished. Found a news article from 6 years ago. Fire. Kitchen explosion. 1 fatality, several injured. No reopening. No renovations. Completely condemned. But one of the photos in the article stopped me cold. It was blurry, taken on a phone, probably by a witness. In the background, behind the smoke and flashing lights, stood a woman. A woman with a forest green coat. And beside her, the man I saw through the cafe window, standing inches apart. Her face pressed into his chest like she'd just lost everything. She had told me she'd been out of town that weekend, visiting her sister in Oregon. But the woman in the photo wasn't in Oregon. She was in that street. With him. The man I wasn't supposed to know about. And suddenly, I understood something I didn't want to believe. The man wasn't a secret. He was a plan she abandoned. And now, he was back. I didn't go back to the cabin right away. I sat in my car in front of that diner for at least an hour, engine off, fingers trembling over the steering wheel, staring at nothing, trying to remember the last time Clara ever truly looked at me without editing her face first. When had I stopped being her person? Was it gradual? Like a fade in sunlight, too slow to notice until everything is washed out? Or was it a switch? Something she decided one ordinary afternoon while I was folding laundry and humming a song from the radio? I don't know. I still don't know. But I do know this. That photo from the fire wasn't just damning because of where she was. It was damning because of how she was. Her face wasn't confused or panicked. She wasn't caught in the chaos. She was anchored. And that man, the same one I saw in the cafe, had his arms around her in the most familiar way I've ever seen. It wasn't a rescue embrace. It was possession, reconnection, maybe reunion. I drove back to the cabin just before dusk. Leaves scraped the road like dry whispers. I killed the headlights early and parked down the slope where she wouldn't see me from the window. I didn't want to be theatrical. I wasn't trying to ambush her. I just needed a minute, a breath, a second to observe her before stepping back into the role I'd apparently been underplaying for years. The moment I stepped inside, she greeted me like nothing happened. You were gone a while, she said, stirring something on the stove, her back to me, like she hadn't just possibly rewritten the entire foundation of our marriage. Did you get the firewood? I didn't go to the store, I said, and my voice cracked, because I hadn't planned to say it. It just came out, dry and raw. She turned slowly. What? I took a step forward. My legs felt hollow. I wanted to find out if the cafe ever reopened. There it was, the pause. The microscopic delay where the body panics before the brain catches up. She blinked too slowly. Her eyes shifted toward the window, then back to me. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. God. Her voice was so steady it made me nauseous. I hated how good she was at it. At control. At quiet lies with smooth delivery. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw anything. I just pulled out my phone and showed her the photo from the article. The woman in the coat, her face unmistakable, pressed against a man I had only seen once but would never forget. She stared at it for a long time. A long time. And for a moment, I thought she was going to finally come clean. But then she did the worst possible thing she could have done. She smiled. Not out of joy. Not even sarcasm. It was worse. It was pity. You don't know what that was, she said gently, as if I was some lost child trying to understand adult pain. Then tell me. I snapped. Please. Tell me. Who was he? Why did you write those napkins? Why did you freeze in the street like you saw death wearing his face? Her eyes went glassy. It's not what you think. That line, I said. That line should be banned from marriage. Because it never means something better than what I think. She walked past me and poured herself a glass of water. Her hand trembled slightly. She gripped the counter to steady it. We were engaged. Once. Before you. Before everything. But he left. Disappeared. No note. No explanation. I was a wreck for years. I swallowed hard. Then why did I never hear about him? Because he wasn't supposed to come back. I don't know what I was expecting. But that answer knocked the wind out of me in a strange way. It was honest, I could tell. But it was also incomplete. There was more. There was so much more. You don't hide an entire engagement, a life, a fire, a ghost, unless there are still strings attached. Is that who you called last night? I asked. She looked at me for a long time. And then, with no anger, no shame, she nodded. Just once. My hands started to shake. I sat down on the edge of the couch because I felt like the floor had tilted. Are you in love with him? She hesitated. She hesitated. I don't know, she said. For words. For quiet words that detonated something in me. I wanted her to lie. I really, truly did. I wanted her to scream and cry and make it sound crazy. Make me sound paranoid. Tell me I was reading into things. I would have taken rage. I would have taken denial. But she didn't even try. And that's when it clicked. She wasn't waiting for him to come back. She was waiting for me to figure it out. I didn't leave that night. I wanted to. Every cell in my body was vibrating with that ancient instinct, the one that tells you to run when the ground splits open. But I didn't. Maybe because I was afraid that if I walked out that door, she'd follow me. Or worse, she wouldn't. We didn't speak much after her confession, if you could even call it that. I stayed on the couch, staring at the shadows the fireplace cast across the wooden ceiling, while she stayed in the bedroom with the door closed. No yelling. No apology. Just that lingering sense of something broken beyond language. Around 2 a.m., I got up and walked through the cabin like a ghost. Every creak in the floorboard made me flinch. I opened drawers, peeked into cabinets, not because I thought I'd find anything specific, but because I didn't trust anything anymore. When reality cracks once, you start seeing fractures everywhere. Then I found something I wish I hadn't. In her bag, tucked deep in the lining like it was meant to never be found, was a folded envelope. No address. No stamp. Just a single sheet of heavy paper, handwritten. And the ink was fresh. I shouldn't have read it. But I did. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to him. Not by name. Again, always he, but it was obvious. She had written it like a goodbye, but not a final one. More like a pause. Like a comma before a longer sentence. She wrote about closure, about doing the right thing, and about me, how I deserved peace, how I was a good man, but not the one. And at the end, she wrote, if we ever meet again after this, let's promise not to lie this time. I read it 3 times, hoping each time it would feel less like a blade. Then I burned it in the fireplace. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted to see what version of herself she'd wake up as. Would it be the doting wife? The conflicted ghost? The manipulator? Or the honest woman she never allowed herself to be? Morning came, and she acted like we hadn't cracked open the ugliest parts of our marriage just hours before. She made coffee, played music, hummed again. She even kissed me lightly on the cheek and asked if I wanted to take a walk before we checked out. I stared at her for a long moment. She smiled. And I realized something that changed the entire framework of what I thought I was dealing with. She wasn't just hiding a past. She was testing the future, pushing to see how far she could go, how much she could say, how close she could take me to the edge without actually pushing me off. It was like she wanted me to walk away first, to be the one who broke it, so that she could keep her hands clean. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a man who came back. This was about a woman who never fully chose to stay. I played along, said we should walk. We strolled through the trees like nothing had happened, like two strangers auditioning for a role called Happy Couple. She told me stories from college. I nodded. She pointed out a hawk in the distance. I pretended to care. But the whole time, one thought was drilling into the back of my mind like a cold nail. How many years had I lived with someone who was still waiting for someone else to come back for her? We packed the car, drove home, unloaded the bags. I watched her walk back into our apartment, into the life we'd built like it still fit her. But it didn't. It hadn't in a long time. And now I was certain. The version of her I married was a costume stitched over grief, stitched over guilt, stitched over 1,000 decisions I was never part of. I went to sleep that night knowing something was about to break, because I'd finally stopped hoping she'd tell me the truth on her own. And I was done pretending I didn't already know it. I didn't plan what I was going to do. Not really. I told myself I'd be patient, calm, calculating, above the chaos. But the truth is, once you've seen the way someone can lie to your face without blinking, you start to second-guess every memory they've ever handed you like a gift. And the worst part? You still want to believe them. Even now, part of me still wanted her to sit me down and tell me I misunderstood everything. That I'd connected the wrong dots. That it was grief, not betrayal. That I'd found ghosts, not proof. But that didn't happen. Instead, 2 days after we got back from the cabin, I found her sitting in the hallway on the floor, back against the wall, staring at a single photo she had pulled from one of the old albums. I recognized it immediately. Us, at her cousin's wedding in Maine. Summer evening. She was wearing that dark blue dress I loved. I remember because we laughed for 20 minutes trying to get a decent photo, and this one was taken right after we gave up. Her laugh was real. My hand was on the small of her back. We looked like we belonged to something unbreakable, but she was staring at it like it was someone else's life. I don't remember this, she said softly, not looking up. What do you mean? I asked, standing there with a grocery bag still in my hands. This moment, this dress, this day, I don't remember feeling like that. I set the bag down, walked over, looked down at the photo from behind her. My own face looked back at me, smiling, naive. So sure. You were happy, I said, not entirely sure who I was trying to convince. Was I? She replied. Or was I just good at acting like I was? And there it was again. That foggy ambiguity. The way she said things that made me feel like the villain for daring to question her, while also inviting me to drown in her confusion. I hated it. I hated how she held all the mystery while I was left with all the damage. That night, after she fell asleep, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my old external hard drive. There was a folder she didn't know existed. I made it back when we first moved in together. I had copied over text messages, voice notes, photos from our early months. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I did. Because I loved the version of her I thought I knew so deeply that I wanted to preserve her forever, like a museum exhibit that time couldn't ruin. I found one message. A voicemail, actually, from almost 10 years ago. She'd left it after staying out late with friends. It was casual, sweet, a little tipsy. But at the end, as she was saying goodbye, she whispered something under her breath that I didn't notice back then. Not until now. Good night, Jamie. I froze. My name is not Jamie. I played it back. Again. Again. Each time, the word hit sharper. Like it was designed to hurt in retrospect. Back then, I must have missed it. Maybe I thought she said, baby, or maybe I was just too blind to hear anything that didn't fit the script I'd written for us. But now, it was unmistakable. Jamie. The man in the cafe. The man in the photo. The man she was engaged to before me. The man she told me had disappeared without a word. So why was she saying his name in my voicemail inbox almost a year into our relationship? I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I watched her make breakfast like she hadn't just detonated my past without knowing it. She kissed me, told me to have a good day, said she might visit the market later, and asked if I wanted her to pick up those pickles I like. I nodded. Then I asked her one question. A simple one. Hey, Do you remember your voicemail from the night you went out with Casey and Liv back in 2016? She froze. A beat too long. No? Why? I shrugged. No reason. Just came across it. You sounded happy. She smiled, soft, slow, uneasy. I'm sure I was. And that was it. She turned back to the stove. I looked at her and realized something horrifying. I wasn't trying to catch her anymore. I was waiting to see what version of the lie she'd serve me next, and I didn't know if I had the strength to keep pretending it still tasted like love. It wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming match, no shattered glass, no accusations shouted across the kitchen table. In the end, when it all broke open, it happened in the kind of quiet that only exists between two people who've stopped pretending. I played her the voicemail. Not in anger, not like a trap, just as a truth. She listened in silence, her face unreadable. When it ended, she didn't deny it. She didn't spin. She just sat down across from me, pulled the sleeves of her sweater over her hands like she always did when she was about to say something that scared her, and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 9 years. I never stopped loving him, she said, voice low, steady, almost exhausted. Even when I thought he was gone for good. Even when I met you. I swallowed hard. So what were we then? You were my anchor, she said, eyes finally meeting mine. You were the first person who made me feel safe after chaos. And I convinced myself that safety was the same thing as love. It should have broken me, but it didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something that had been buried beneath all the confusion and betrayal. I wasn't innocent either. I had felt the distance growing for years. I had sensed the versions of her that never fully belonged to me. But I loved the idea of us so much that I stopped asking questions I didn't want answers to. I read the letter you wrote him, I said. She didn't flinch, just nodded. I burned it, I added, but not out of rage. I burned it because I knew it wasn't meant to last, and I needed it gone to believe anything here could still be real. Then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed, not mockingly, but softly, almost in disbelief. I never sent it, she said. I wrote it to let him go, and I left it there because I wanted you to find it. I stared at her, searching for the lie, but there wasn't one. I saw him that day, she continued, at the cafe, after 9 years. And something happened. I looked at him, and I didn't feel what I expected. I didn't feel love. I didn't feel loss. I felt nothing, just a memory. I didn't speak. I let her keep going. That was the moment I realized I'd been in love with the version of him I had to invent to survive losing him. And I had spent our entire marriage quietly grieving someone who didn't exist anymore. Or maybe never did. I'm sorry I never told you. I didn't think I was lying. I thought I was healing. She stood, came over, sat beside me, not across. And then, but if you still want to leave me, I won't stop you. There it was, the door, wide open. No manipulation, no desperate pleas, just truth and the space to make my own. But I didn't leave. Instead, I told her the only thing I was sure of. I think I've been holding on to a version of us that died a long time ago. But today, right now, this is the most honest we've ever been. And maybe that's something worth saving. We cried together. That kind of quiet, shaking cry that doesn't come from one thing, but from everything at once. From years of weight finally being set down. No, we didn't magically fix everything overnight. But we started again. From the ashes of everything we weren't. From the version of her that finally stopped running. And the version of me that finally opened his eyes and chose to stay.